Tony's right. How are you? So this is going to be a quick video about intentionality in writing. I did one video that was like a half an hour long talking about my day at the Bay to Ocean Writing Conference, Eastern Shore Writers Association, and all the fun goodies that I also got was in another video. So I got 5 books of poetry, and I read a poem from each of them to give you a taste, and then I read like their little bios, and just let you guys know like what's available in terms of opportunities and stuff like that out there. So yeah, all that. So this video is about intentionality in poetry, and I'm gonna like backtrack to when I was applying for poetry and like how I've changed as a poet. So change as a poet and getting into poetry and stuff like that. So my perception of poetry was that it was like very like you just do things to do things, and you just jerk around with a lot of ideas and you just throw them out there, and you know they just like happen to work, and they're like always witty, and they're always sassy, and they're always thought-provoking, and they're profound and all that kind of stuff. And when I got into the program, I thought I was going to be this very elusive kind of poet, because poetry, really good poetry, I kind of feel like is elusive. And it's not elusive in that you can't get what it means, but it's just like, it's almost like you can capture that feeling again, but it's like a fleeting feeling, but it's a good feeling of like having experienced this thing. I know that moments like this is a moment and it's going to pass, but I'm happy that I've had this moment, and it sticks with you, but it's just still elusive. Like poetry, I feel like is elusive. Good writing is still like elusive, but it can instruct and it can inspire and all that kind of stuff. But it's their calling in a book and a poem and a story, and you have to find your own, and you can't ever really capture someone else's. Like you can try and do imitation poetry, which is a big thing, but ultimately you come out of your own poetry. You know what I'm saying? Who you are comes out in your own poetry, what you're thinking about, what you believe, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean you have to outrightly do identity markers. That's not what I'm talking about, but just things that matter to you and the reasons why they matter to you come through. And it may not be as like direct as like, I like supporting puppy organizations because of this, but the poem may be about, so when I got into poetry, I thought it was just like you just are, because it comes out like poetry is just like these people, these like slight assholes that are like away from people, slightly judging them, and slightly like I'm too cool for school, and then they're writing on stuff and it's like very elusive, and then we find it like 200 years later and we're like, oh yeah, this like shit is so deep. And so I thought it was gonna be like so deep as a poet, and it really hampered my first semester because I kind of felt like I was just doing stuff and I was very guarded. And what you kind of come to realize within writing in general, poetry especially though, I feel like, is that you can't, like, you can be guarded, but like eventually like you're gonna start to want to actually open up and write about stuff and really write about it, like really, even if it's 5 words, you really like put that work in to make those 5 words the best 5 words possible. And so you have to get over yourself a little bit, but you have to switch from trying to be elusive to actually being intentional about your work. And it's like that elusive nature comes out. Like nobody is going to be you as a writer, right? And it's only when you kind of like give up the ghost of like trying to be the next Keats or try to be the next, R.I.P. Nikki Giovanni, well, R.I.P. Keats because he's been dead for a minute. But like until you give up that idea that like you're gonna be the next them, and you just step into your own, like, I feel like your poetry suffers when you really start to make poems that really are like hard hitting for you. That's when you do it. And it's not like a difficulty subject matter type thing. It's just kind of like they're challenging you to do certain things. And when the reader gets that, like they're like, damn, for real? And it's like, yes. Do you know how hard this shit was? You know, some people will write a good poem within like 10 minutes, and some people it takes months, if not years, to make lines, you know? So, writing with intentionality just means you really start to hone in on what you want to say and like what you're speaking about, and like your voice and your stanzas and your breaks and stuff like that. Because one of the things that I think people going into poetry think is that they have to write a bunch of like similes and metaphors, and they have to be this like grandiose type language, and it's flowery and it's kind of obscuring a little bit. No, you have to be really intentional about it. You have to give up the idea of what you think a poet is and just be a poet. And that's being you, like who you are. You are a poet. You are the poet, you know? You have to kind of like just give that up, like give up that idea of what you think a poet is, and just be a poet. Like write sincerely, honestly. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to write like very crude language or anything like that, but like write sincerely and honestly. And I feel like when you do that, you will start to become more intentional, because it's not all this other shit in the way, and you can really start to edit yourself. You know, being in like workshops and stuff like that, you have to kind of like let your guard down. You can't be like, you can't always feel like, don't feel the need to always explain yourself. Like our professor is like very good about like, the reason why we have certain reactions is generally from a need to be understood, or like if I say this or I write like this or I do this, like people won't like it, or people won't like me, or they'll make a judgment call about me. And you know, that's something I think will always kind of like plague you. But I kind of feel like after a while, like it becomes very exhausting to try and be the poet of another like person. Like you're trying to be like the next so and so. It's the same thing in music when people, they're trying to carve out their own lane in music. And yes, genres, you know, people are in certain genres and they're forerunners and there's mavericks within those genres, but like people have their own thing, and then people keep calling you the next so and so, the next this, the next that, our generation's this generation's that, right? Like, you know, our generation's Beyonce, our generation's Prince, our generation's, you know, the Beatles. And there's this, it's like you can never just be you. Like you can always be inspired with people, but you can never just be you. And it makes for a very dull world, because it's like everybody's trying to now fit those molds because that's the most marketable. And we get it, like you do want to make money from stuff and it has to be marketable, but the world is just such, it's like the intentionality gets lost because you're now trying to chase that vision that sometimes you have of yourself of I'm the next this, I'm the next that, and then you start to write in that style, and it's like you become less intentional about it. And then there's people who you really do feel like when you listen to their work, they're very intentional about what they're doing. And I think it shows. It's something that you have to work on. It's something that you have to explore. But over time, I think your intentionality shows. So, and it just helps. It helps to flesh out your ideas. But when you refine them, start to question your intentionality of like your lines and your word choice and your punctuation and all that kind of stuff. Like start to, you know, like start to challenge that. So intentionality just means, are you using, like I'm gonna let's read from here, the fiction. She wrote about concision and precision and flash. So concision, she said, and by concision, I mean conveying meaning with as few words as possible. And by precision, I mean the quality of being accurate, exact, and distinct. And you really have to put in the time and the effort to do this. This is a skill. And I think that's another misconception about being a poet, that this is just an innate thing, and you write a sentence or you write a poem and it's the best shit that's ever been written, and you don't have to do editing and you don't have to revise and stuff like that. And that's just not true for like the majority of people. Pretty much everyone, they have to revise, they have to do stuff, they have to take away, they have to reassess. And sometimes it's reassessing what your positioning is within the poem, how you what is the entry point of your poem? One of the things that I write a lot in workshops and I get back as feedback is that maybe we can start this, like maybe there's a few lines in the poem that could be a better entry point than the one that has been chosen, and that the intentionality of choosing that line that's being suggested may yield you a better result in what you're trying to do, that you can trim away the fat and get to the point and to the heart of what you want to say without all the other stuff. Because ultimately, for poetry and writing in general, especially if you're doing technical and shit like that, get to the point. Like, get to the point of what you're trying to say. And it doesn't mean you have to like boom right in the front, but you know, get to the point. I'm going to read this example from Flash Fiction because I feel like if you're a writer of fiction, you may understand this. And this is an intentional piece, kind of. But this is from a journal that's 6 sentences. And we read it. And you can tell how it's an exercise in intentionality. So I'm going to read it. It's called What I Learned About My Therapist, from Facebook, Rachel Winehouse. Her birthday is June 26th. She, Amy, and Michelle went to Ireland. They wish they could go back. My therapist is a hiker, or once she went hiking. She needed an electrician in 2017, and over 43 friends gave referrals. She's been a blonde, a redhead, and when she was tagged in an elementary school picture, I could spot her right away. Second to the left, those bright, compassionate eyes. What I would give to like the photo, to crash into the computer, is to plant myself beside her, to know her inside out the way she knows me. And this is 6 sentences. Right? Like, there's intentionality to this. And when you kind of start to do that, it's kind of like intentionality also helps you to start editing yourself. Not that you can't have like diarrhea of the words, but like once you start to really hone in, like you start to have a refinement about your skill, and you start to really pick up on your voice and own it. And so the stuff that, this year, for me, I think I'm starting to become a way more experimental. I think it kicked off last semester. Like this school year, I kicked it off last semester with my literary seminar, being exposed to different things and realizing that there's this box that I put myself in that I could like move out of. And part of the reason why I don't necessarily submit perhaps weirder things is because sometimes you feel like you're gonna be judged. And then I have to think, am I being intentional with this poem? Am I being intentional? Am I putting this dash here because I just like the aesthetic of it, or does it serve some real function, some real purpose? And that's the thing with intentionality. It tends to be it's supposed to be moving everything along. Like, things are supposed to be moving along in your poem and your story and stuff like that. And it just helps when you have it. And it's not that you can necessarily immediately tell when someone doesn't, but it does become a lot easier. And on the visual page especially, your intentionality helps the reader move in and out, right? It's like, it's working for you as an exercise and refinement and stuff like that, but it's also helping the reader and dealing with issues of pacing and context and all that kind of, So this is another poem that was pretty cool. I liked it. It's To the Woman Crying Uncontrollably in the Next Stall by Kim Adonisio. Or I don't know. And I'm going to show you what it looks like after I read it, but it's an intentional way of like doing this, right? If you ever woke in your dress at 4 a.m., ever closed your legs to someone you loved opened, then for someone you didn't move, You didn't move against a pillow in the dark, stood miserably on a beach, seaweed clinging to your ankles, paid good money for a bad haircut, backed away from a mirror that wanted to kill you, bled into the back seat for lack of a tampon. If you swam across a river under rain, sang using a dildo for a microphone, stayed up to watch the moon eat the sun, entire ripped out stitches in your heart, because why not? If you think nothing and no one can listen, I love you, joy is coming. And this is what it looks like. And so there's no real punctuation there, there's no real contrast here until there, and that's the intentionality right there. Like that, all that is still intentional, but you can start to notice what is intentional about what's being taken away and what's intentional about what's being put in. And sometimes your lack of things make it more apparent when something is placed there, right? Your eye kind of goes to it, like, why would you put that there? But a lesson of intentionality is really, really good. So I try to be more intentional. I'm going to write poems now that have an experimental form, and I have to kind of think of a grid system, so to speak, of where I'm placing things, because sometimes I just space things out and space things here, and I want to be more intentional about where I'm putting things and what is the correlation between things. And sometimes, yes, you kind of just like something somewhere and you want to put it there, but I want to be more intentional about where I'm putting things and not just you want to be experimental, so you make a space here and a space there and you drop something down and stuff like that. Like, what is it doing for you as the writer? Like, where are you going with it? And then, like, what is it going to be doing for the reader and to the reader? And is that what you really want to happen? You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to you got to think about that shit. So that's kind of where I am, thinking about that shit. So yeah, that's it about intentionality. I think it's really cool. Yeah, let me know what your thoughts are below. I'll talk to you guys later.